The question today is, who is a real Seventh-day Adventist? Now, this is not about trying to do a witch hunt and pointing fingers. It's about examining our life. It's about deciding, am I really what I say I am? I always grew up thinking there was two groups in the church. I grew up thinking that there was the hot, on-fire Christians, and then there was all the lukewarm Christians. We're going to be learning this week that there's three groups in the church. And we're going to study some of those three groups and find out how to identify what group you're in. And why in disasters there's always three groups. When the Twin Trade Towers came down, when there's airplane accidents, there's always three groups. And there's two small groups and one large group. And we're going to study some of that. And right now, if you want to find out who you are and why you're here, some of you may, when I was 17 years old, I was trying to determine that. And some of you may be going through that same process yourself and saying, God, what is this all about? Is this real? Now, it has been discovered that organizations that don't focus on their mission, they eventually die. But organizations are just like people. This morning we heard a really wonderful sermon. Those of you that did not miss the morning service, you don't want to miss any more if you missed it. But the question is, what is your mission? You have an individual responsibility God has given you. And if you attend to your mission, and everybody does that, the church also has a mission. But it's a combination of all the individual missions. But the church as a people has a mission that needs to be accomplished, and that is prepare a dying world for Jesus' second coming. But what if you haven't prepared yourself? What if you're not ready yourself? How can you prepare somebody else? Do you think that before you can help somebody else, you must know what you're about? Absolutely. You cannot share something you don't have. You have to have a vivid experience. And last night, we learned about that. Last night is you have to have something to share before you can share it. You have to have an experience. Now, I'd been working for the denomination for 15 years. My father was a pastor pilot. My mother was a nurse. And I followed after my parents' footsteps, and I became a pastor pilot and a nurse. And my parents raised me overseas. I was 1 year old when they took me to South America. And they took me to Bolivia as a baby, 1 year old. And I grew up there. And, that was all my experience. My life was as a missionary kid and a pilot and a pastor's kid, PK, they say. And I was out in the jungles, and of course I had my friends from the jungles, but you know how happy I was when I heard another missionary family was going to move down with us. I was the oldest of 4 children, and I was very happy to know that the other family had 4 children too. It turned out that the oldest of their children was a young lady. So we grew up together. I was 3 years old when I remember first meeting her. And we grew up together, playing together, and I became her best friend. I remember going down to the jungles and with an axe, and we would cut a tree that this big around. We would cut and cut and cut with the axe for a period of about a month. And pretty soon, to watch that big old tree crash. Have you ever released that much energy to watch a big tree go down? Well, I told this story, and one of my biology friends just nearly had a fit. He got so angry. He said, don't you know there was a species of bug in every tree that can never be replaced again? You killed off a whole species of bug, of insect. And I said, I didn't know I was killing insects. All I knew was we knocked the tree down and we made a little tree house up in the branches. And after a while, the leaves all fell off, and then we'd go knock another tree down. And in the jungles of South America, it doesn't seem like it's a big loss because there's thousands of them, and one goes down and another one grows right up. But I know today we know that that's a problem, the world needs trees. And so, as a kid in the jungles of South America, you never thought about knocking a tree down, but we used to play tree house that way and go up in the branches, and many times we'd find wild honey in these trees where we knocked them down and we'd see the bees were coming out of a hole, and then pretty soon we'd go in there and we'd go in with some mask and we'd get all this wild honey out. And so this happened occasionally. Anyway, she became my best friend, and then one day when I was 8 years old, I heard a disturbing rumor. I heard that another missionary boy wanted to be her friend too. Now, I just came back from Guam. And I just finished a camp meeting in Guam this last week. And the missionary boy that I was talking about happened to be the principal of the school right there. So, normally I don't tell you the name because none of you probably know. But in this case, in Guam, I told them, and that missionary boy was John. And everybody laughed because they all knew John. No, yeah, I'm just pointing. He's not there. And so, anyway, this missionary boy said, I'm going to become her boyfriend. Well, immediately I got jealous. I got very defensive. And so I went out and bought a bottle of perfume. And I took it to her. And I gave it to her. And she smelled it. And I asked her to marry me. They say a child is known by his ways. I moved fast when I was young, and I still move fast today. And so, fortunately, she agreed to marry me. Fortunately. Because 12 years later, she did marry me. So that's the love story that I have. It's usually the girls that say that, but but it's kind of a cute story, huh? Anyway, I wish I had plenty of book Mission Pilot for you. I always give them away everywhere I speak, but I came from overseas, and I normally would bring some. But you can get it on the book. You can get it in digital form. If you're interested, I can make a copy for you and give it to you in digital format on a CD or your little memory stick if you want. But you can go buy it at the ABC. But the story of Mission Pilot begins with my hijacking. We're going to be talking about angel care later on this week. And it talks about the love story and how flashbacks. So it's a book on romance. It's a book on danger and violence. It's a book about God. And so it's great for teenagers. But I began early in life by finding my wife. Now, so you need to be careful who your friends are. Because whoever you're sitting by might be somebody you marry, so be careful. Pick your friend. When I was teenagers don't mind that, but when I told that at ASI to the 10-year-olds, the boys went yuck. At that age, they weren't about to think of girls, sitting next to a girl, marrying her. That'd be terrible. And so God prepared us early for some experience. And so we went back. We met in college years later. We studied nursing together while I was studying nursing and aviation. We got married halfway through nursing, and then we went to the mission field, and I worked for 15 years for the church. Now, I love working for the church. It was especially in the area where I worked, there was mission aviation and medical work, and then later on, when they closed the aviation program, I went back and I took computer science and got a graduate degree in software engineering. Went back and started installing networks all around South America. Then I was able to teach software engineering and computer science classes and take my students on the airplanes around the Caribbean and go to the different islands and install networks for the hospitals and the missions and the conferences and for the schools and writing software and just using the skills, high-techy stuff. We really enjoyed that. And especially when you're combining airplanes and computers. It was a really rewarding work. I loved my work. And then about 15 years into my service, it was time to go back home. So you see, our children were getting older. We'd adopted 3 children, but we'd had 2 girls of our own, and we adopted 1 more girl and 2 boys. And our oldest girls were getting old enough to go to school, and we decided to go back to the States. And as we were planning on going back to the States in the missionary terms, we call that a permanent return. It is time to go on PR, which means you're leaving the mission field and making plans to go back. And so when I did that, all of a sudden I had a crisis. My crisis was, I'm a missionary, but now I'm leaving the mission field. My whole identity, my whole dream in life was to be a missionary, and now I wasn't going to be a missionary anymore. So the question was, who am I? What am I going to do? Well, as an engineer, I can always get a job. I can always find a way to make a living. And so I thought to myself, if I'm not going to be a missionary anymore, then really what am I? A businessman? Am I a pastor? Am I a nurse? Am I a pilot? What am I going to be now? And then I realized I had a big disappointment. I had not done as much for God as I had wanted to. Now, I had enjoyed my work. I had worked for God really hard. We'd accomplished a lot. But really what I wanted to do was change the world. Have you ever wanted to do something great? How many of you actually dream of someday getting a job, retiring?